Good afternoon and welcome to another stream here on DreamBank's Facebook and LinkedIn page. My name is Andy Frisky. I am a senior dream curator at DreamBank. Very excited to introduce our featured speaker today. But before we go ahead and do that, I'd like to give a little bit of context as to who we are and why we are here. So DreamBank is a free community resource that is located in the heart of Madison, Wisconsin. We're put on by American Family Insurance, and the whole reason why we exist is to help inspire people to pursue their dreams. And in large part, we do that by the events that we offer. So we have 11 different event series that cover a wide bucket range of various dreams. Anything ranging from our career series, which is what this event happens to fall into today. We have a business-related event series, Learning Lab, which is kind of a how-to or a 101. We host fitness events, family-related activities, and events in Spanish, just to name a few. So if you're curious about some of the upcoming offerings, go over to our Facebook page. If you're not already there, press that events tab. That'll give you a good, concise list of what we have in the pipeline, in addition to everything that we have put out since the beginning of quarantine of the pandemic, end of March 2020. We hope to see you all soon, and we will be announcing when we will be returning to the space here shortly, so keep an eye out for that. But let me go ahead and introduce our featured speaker today, Wendy Conrad. So Wendy is a Florida native, certified chief happiness officer, and graduated of Florida Atlantic University with a bachelor's degree, cum laude, in elementary education. Currently, she's a member of the Worksite Wellness Council of the Treasure Coast and Palm Beaches. She founded Your Happy Workplace in 2019. Over the past 2 decades, she's worked for a dozen small businesses and now uses her experience to help other companies that care about their people and their bottom line become more profitable by developing their work culture. Using a holistic approach, she helps business leaders improve their company through creating custom work cultures that attract and retain the right talent for their team. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you, Wendy. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Andy. It sounds so much more official when those words come out of somebody else's mouth. So thank you for that introduction. I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation here. And Andy, pop in if the tech's not working. I'm going to go ahead and start. Welcome to Creating Real Connection in the Workplace. And thank you to DreamBank for hosting this event today. I am Wendy Conrad. Again, I'm a work culture strategist, certified chief happiness officer, speaker, teacher, founder of Your Happy Workplace. A little bit gift famous. Some of you may have seen me, as some of my gifts will be popping in and out of this presentation. So let's go ahead and dive in. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Go ahead and grab a pen and paper or open up a blank Word doc if you're on your desktop in case you want to take notes. And I've got a couple of little mini writing exercises that we're going to do throughout the presentation. So have that handy. I encourage you to be present and monotask during this presentation. That means silencing your phones, closing out of any other tabs, eliminating any distractions you might have around, and be present to get the most out of this presentation. Also, be kind to your eyes. Don't solidly stare the whole time into the screen for the full length of this presentation. I encourage you to look away every so often. If you need to stand up and stretch and just listen, do that. And also, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and use that chat. I won't be able to see those in real time, but Andy will be chiming in with any zingers, as we say. And I'm sure we'll have a minute or two maybe at the end to address any of those questions. So let's get going. So today we'll be talking about why creating team connection is important in the first place, some main ingredients for fostering that real connection, tips for becoming a better communicator. Communication is such a foundational thing, and some fun activities to foster that connection. And this presentation is geared towards workplaces and leaders, but really a lot of what we are talking about today can be applied to any community, whether that's your family, friends, school, and of course, the workplace. So real connection at work. Is it a dream? Is it something we can actually create? Before we talk about how we create it, let's talk about what connection is. It's defined as a relationship in which a person, thing, or idea is linked or associated with something else. So that happened organically a lot when we were working in person, but now that we have a lot of people working from home or hybrid situations, it can be more of an effort to create those strong connections. So why is connection important? In 1938, Harvard started a study using all male subjects because at the time Harvard was an all male school. And now they're even studying some of the original participants' offspring. But the research from this study showed that the single most important factor in happiness is relationships. And not only that, but loneliness can kill us. It's as powerful as smoking or alcoholism. So the research also found that the strength and health of our relationships are really strong factors of how happy we are and how long we live. And how happy we are affects how we show up for work. So now more than ever, my favorite pandemic phrase that you see in every commercial, now more than ever, it's important to foster emotional connection while we may be physically distanced. And this can take more of an effort because before those activities were happening by default, you stop at someone's desk, you're sipping on your morning coffee, you're having a conversation, you go to lunch together. A lot of that is not happening organically. So we need to recreate it in new and impactful ways. And these connections are essential for innovation, productivity, and efficiency, all things that we want to be happening in our workplaces. So how do we do this? What are the ingredients for creating this? The first one is trust, and psychological safety is so important, must exist within our workplaces. What is psychological safety? That's defined as being able to show oneself without fear of negative consequences. So basically, it means your team members feel they can speak up, they can be themselves, they can ask questions, they're not afraid to contribute to the conversation, to have ideas, even if those ideas may be unpopular. And if your workplace lacks psychological safety, it can be a big cause of stress for your team, which can inhibit real connections. The next ingredient is honesty. And that's kind of overlapping with psychological safety, but we need to get more comfortable with our own truths and not be afraid to be ourselves. And that's where it overlaps with psychological safety. If we are in leadership roles, it's part of our responsibility to create that kind of environment and model that behavior. And then the last ingredient is feedback. And when I say feedback, I'm talking about giving it and also asking for it if you're not getting it without asking for it. And now before you say, Wendy, we just wanted to learn some new icebreakers or how to do Zoom trivia better, not talk about our feelings and trust and honesty, but building real working relationships and a healthy culture before you can plan the fun team building activities or events is essential. Otherwise, you're just putting sprinkles on poo, to be quite frank with you. And sprinkles on poo does not make for an ice cream sundae. So that's why we need to talk about these foundational pieces for building those connections. And then when you start to plan those fun things, it doesn't feel fake or forced. So communication. Foundation for all of this stuff. And in my line of work, I read a lot of research and studies and came across a very interesting statistic that said that 69% of managers are often uncomfortable communicating with employees. 69%. So how can we be better communicators and that way feel more comfortable doing it? The first tip is to recognize different communication styles. We all communicate differently, and there's a ton of models out there, but the one I like is by Mark Murphy. He's an author and a leadership coach, and he outlines 4 different communication styles. And those, I'm going to briefly describe each, see if you recognize yourself or members of your team or family or community in these descriptions. So analytical, those are your numbers people. They love hard data. They love clearly defined tasks. Intuitive, those are your big thinkers. They're kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from analytical. Functional communicators, they love the process. They like to get in the details. They like step-by-step guides. And personal, they value relationships over informational exchange. And no one style is better than the other, but if you pick the wrong style for your audience, whether that be your coworkers, your team members, leadership, that can shut down listening and really be a recipe for trouble. Now, the important thing here is not to memorize what the 4 styles are, but the main takeaway is to recognize that we all communicate and hear and listen differently. Our communication styles are shaped by many things: our childhood, adult experiences, our role models. So that's why it's almost feels like we're speaking different languages. So instead of getting frustrated if people don't understand you the first time you try and get a message across, just be cognizant of how your communication styles differ, and that may give you some insight. And if you want to get your message across effectively, know who your audience is and adjust your communication style accordingly. And also be aware of your communication style, because more and more our success comes down to our ability to communicate in a way that can be understood by everyone. So important in our workplaces. And another fun fact is our brains decide whether we're in or out of a conversation in the first few seconds or moments. So take full advantage of that moment with your body language, your facial expression, and with your own attention. And also, when we're talking about communication, we need to include listening in that. So practicing active listening is really important. Are you listening? Think about what is keeping you from being fully present in the conversation. Maybe you're thinking about events from earlier in the day. What are you going to make for dinner? What are you going to say next? I'm notoriously famous for doing that. Notice those things and then just return your attention back to the speaker. So here are some 2 tips that can help you become a better active listener. And the first one is to repeat back, reflect back on what you're hearing to the speaker. That gives the opportunity for any kind of miscommunications to be clarified, and then to ask questions. And that lets the speaker know that you are listening, and it increases understanding. And then finally, to be a better communicator, be an example. When your team or your community or whoever you're wanting to improve connections with sees these kind of things modeled, it makes it easier for them to incorporate it into their practices. So how can we create opportunities for these ingredients to be fostered and for thriving connections to exist? The trust, the honesty, the feedback. And do it in a fun way that, again, doesn't feel forced or artificial. And these next few slides, I'm going to be talking about specific activities that you can take back to your workplaces and try with your team, but also some tips and guidelines on better ways to interact with each other. When I took my Chief Happiness Officer certification last fall, my professor, who had worked with professional basketball teams, shared this amazing activity that his team did. And they did what they called the Daily 5. And that is where every night before they went to sleep, they would write down 5 successes that they had for the day. And they noticed that this powerful exercise started to affect their performance on the court in a positive way, because they were training their brains for success. They're priming that success. And not only that, it started to foster stronger connections among their teammates, because they started to text them and call them and say, hey, did you do your Daily 5 yet today? Did you do your Daily 5? Don't forget to do your Daily 5. And it started to build this kind of connection with this popular activity. So that leads me to a first thing that I want to highlight here is to celebrate wins. We've all heard about celebrating wins at team meetings, But encourage the team to keep a daily journal of successes. Maybe start a daily 5. And it doesn't have to be 5. It can be 3 or 2 or 1. And share those with each other. So right now I want you to grab that pen and paper or that blank Word doc that you have open, and we're going to do a little writing exercise. I want you to write down a win that you have had in the past week. Write that down, or something that you can celebrate. And it can be something simple. For me, it's, hey, I did yoga 2 days in a row this week when I haven't been doing yoga for months. So that was a win for me. And then I want you to write down someone you will call on the phone to share it with and have a conversation. A win you want to celebrate, someone you want to share it with. That can be a work win. You can want to share it with a coworker or someone on your team. It's up to you. So yay for doing the writing exercise. So the second thing is to don't forget about sharing fails. And the Church of Fail is kind of the same concept with the wins, where you celebrate or talk about failures with the team. Because it's really important to normalize, because we are not failures. Failures are something that happen, and we all fail. It's not a character flaw. So now I want you to grab your handy dandy pen and paper or open Word doc and write down a failure that you've had in the past week. Extra credit if you share the lesson that you've learned from it. And also write down someone who you will share that with. And if you want to share in the chat what you've written down so far, do that too. I'd love to have you guys interact about what your failures and wins are. And this can be something you share with the team or something in your family. It's up to you, because just because we experience failure does not mean that we are failures. So the last thing I want to note here is to incorporate gratitude regularly. Oh, I want to emphasize that so hard because there's lots of benefits to incorporating gratitude into our workplaces. Not only does it strengthen our teams, but it reduces aggression and stress. That's powerful. Ryan Fair, who is an assistant professor of management at the University of Washington in Seattle, did a paper summarizing the landscape of gratitude in the workplace. And I want to share a quote from that here. He says, "We tend to think of organizations as transactional places where you're supposed to be professional. We may think that it's unprofessional to bring things like forgiveness or gratitude or compassion into the workplace," end quote. Yet evidence suggests that gratitude and appreciation contribute to the kind of workplaces where employees actually want to come to work. They feel connected to their purpose and each other, and they don't feel just like parts in a machine. And so now you might be saying, yeah, that's great, gratitude in the workplace. How do we do that? What does that look like? So one way is to have a whiteboard in your office if you're working in person, or there's lots of ways you can do it virtually, where there's a shared doc that everybody can come in and out of and write down what they're grateful for, and it's a living document that changes and evolves. That's a great way. Or if you have the actual whiteboard, everyone passes by it, they write down something, and people can see it change, and the gratitude just kind of exponentially builds. Gratitude circle, that's where you designate a time in your meeting, or maybe schedule a separate meeting for it, where you share gratitude in the workplace. So powerful. Handwritten thank you notes are my jam. I write them all the time just because. And if you think that it takes too much time, I want to reference a past CEO of Campbell's. He wrote 30,000 handwritten notes to everyone in the company. And let me tell you, I still have thank you notes that were written from past mentors and bosses of mine that I still have kept after decades, because that's how impactful they can be. So now I want you to grab your pen, warm it up, get that document ready, and write down something you're grateful for. Maybe it's someone you are grateful for, and feel free to share it in the chat. And also someone you will share that with. Good stuff, y'all. So now we're about halfway through. Perfect time for a dance break. If you want to get up and stretch, or you can do it seated, just move your body. We can do the Wendy gift dance. It's not hard to learn. I'm no TikToker, but it's a good dance. Just stretch, stimulates the brain, keeps you engaged. All right, here we go. So a couple more things we can do in our workplaces to strengthen connections are AMAs, or Ask Me Anything sessions with leadership. This is extremely important and impactful for deeper organizations that have many layers of leadership, where perhaps those on the lower tiers of the organization don't have regular access to the CEOs or C-suite of the company. Or you can do it with department heads. And I'm not talking about Ask Me Anything where people are asking you about your recent divorce. That's not what we're talking about. You can set parameters, of course. And I'm not talking about showing the full financials of the company. That's not what we're talking about either. You can say, I don't know, but I will find out for you. If somebody asks you something that you aren't sure of, it's okay to say, I don't know. That's something I'm learning too. Or say that's sensitive information and here's why, and talk about why you can't share it. Maybe it's a contractual thing. But AMAs are great for fostering transparency and vulnerability. And when you see that modeled in leadership, it's huge in building the trust piece and therefore strengthening the psychological safety and the connections that you have with the team. And then schedule regular one-on-ones. You can make them themed. You can call them tea times. You can call them coffee breaks. You can do them virtually. You can do them in person. However you want to do them, but don't wait for the annual performance review. And I have thoughts about that, but that's another show. To have individual conversations with team members. That should be a regular thing. It keeps connection, and encourage your team members to do that with each other. Check in, check out. I love this. And I want to just say some of these things may seem touchy-feely to many of us. We may be feeling some resistance to some of these ideas and the thought of that's unprofessional or feelings have no place in the workplace. It's really time to welcome our humanity at work. And I think we're seeing that shift happen because we are humans with feelings, and feelings are part of the human experience. So let's go with the grain, and feelings don't go away just when we show up for work. So example of a quick way to do this, check in, check out is where you start. Each meeting starts with how each person is feeling, and it ends with something of value that they got from the meeting. And you can tweak that depending on your team and your industry or however. But a quick, efficient way to do it is to ask the team before a meeting, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you? And that's something that everybody can do quickly in a chat, or everybody can write down and hold up at a meeting. And it gives you kind of a temperature check on the team. Who needs help right now? Who could use support right now? Where can I go to for help when other team members see that someone's not really having that stress right now, but I am? That may be encouraging for them to reach out and say, hey, how are you dealing with what's going on in the company right now? Maybe there's something happening that's stressing everybody out. So that's a great way to do that. The virtual kitchen or the virtual water cooler. This is something that can kind of recreate those organic things that were happening. And you don't have to do it at lunchtime. You can do it at other times during the day and call it a water cooler. It's just kind of like an open Zoom room where people can come in and out and have those conversations about, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Or how are the kids doing? Or, hey, I heard you got a new dog. Tell me more about that. And people can just kind of come and go as they please. And this concept can be created any time of day as a water cooler, or you can do it at lunchtime where people can pop in and eat their lunch, however you want to do it. This one is probably my favorite one that I'm going to share today. 10 common things. And you can do this virtually or in person. This is where you divide the team into smaller groups or breakout rooms if you're meeting virtually. And each group comes up with a list of 10 things they have in common. And it can be 5 things if you're short on time. But each group comes up with that list of 10 things they have in common. This is a great activity to do with newer teams, or if there's been some shifting, if you've hired a lot of new people. That's a great way for everybody to kind of get to know each other a little bit in a short amount of time. So once each group comes up with that list, you come back together as a full group, and each group shares maybe 1 or 2 things that they have in common. I bet you'd be surprised to hear some of those things that you never knew about your team and each other. So encouraging team well-being. I'm pausing here because I want to stress the importance of this piece. The idea of not allowing ourselves to be human at work is slowly falling away, and the philosophies of companies being more willing to invest in the well-being of their teams is becoming more common. You'll see more chief well-being officers, chief happiness officers. LinkedIn even has a head of mindfulness and compassion, which I found really fascinating. When we prioritize these things, it makes people feel seen. It makes people feel human at work. And if you're saying to your team in words and actions, hey, I know this is a stressful time. We are all experiencing collective events, which are stressful in their own ways to each of us individually. And here's what we're doing as an organization to support you. That's the important piece. Here's how I can help. Here are some resources. That is powerful. And we're not talking about having a 1-hour meditation workshop and then not supporting the team the other 39 hours during the work week. It's more impactful when it's a philosophy rather than just 1 or 2 activities. So encouraging mental health days, inviting experts in to talk about financial, physical, mental health, providing and sharing resources, incorporating movement, meals, and mindfulness into every workday. So important and so impactful. So I want to talk about some alternatives to how are you? Because really, how are you? What does that even mean anymore? I saw a meme on social media the other day where a lady was telling a story about how her boss called her and said, hey, how are you? And she reflexively said, fine. And her boss was like, nope, start over. I'm not fine. You're not fine. Nobody's fine. Let's have a real conversation. And she started over. How are you? And she said, super terrible. And she was like, much better. Let's have real conversations. There's no shame in struggling. And the past year-ish has taken its toll on all of us. And we'll all be feeling the effects of that on our mental health for probably months and maybe even years to come. I was speaking to a couple of mental health care professionals that I know, and since the pandemic started, they agree, clearly we're not fine. One said that her suicide hotline calls have increased by 30% during the pandemic. And that's a local stat to me here in Florida. The national stat is closer to 47%. That's people you know, that's people you work with, that's people in your family. Another friend of mine said that her counseling practice has increased dramatically and she continues to see it grow. Busier than ever. So asking your team, how are you, and stopping there doesn't count as checking in. Let me get my pointer finger out. Doesn't count as checking in. We can do better. And this isn't to say we need to be mental health experts, and we need to dig deeper if we are going to create an environment that is safe and, dare I say, healing for your team. This means listening and maybe getting a little uncomfortable with some of what you're hearing, and that's okay. So what do you do instead, you're thinking, right? Here are some alternatives to how are you, and you don't need to furiously write or type these down. I've got these for you on a PDF that we'll share after today. How are you coping? What's been on your mind lately? What do you need from me today? These are all great alternatives. Is there someone I can put you in touch with today? And one I also want to mention that's not on this list is, especially if you're in a leadership role, but this can be impactful for any relationship that you have. Please tell me one thing you'd like me to do more of and one thing you'd like me to do less of. If you ask that regularly of your team, or even in just people in your life, and then listen and act on the information that you receive if there's an action warranted. And as business leaders, again, we don't need to be mental health experts, and we must realize how important mental health is for the humans in our lives, especially now. So provide resources, ask probing questions, and listen. Onward we go. Nothing brings everyone closer to one another than shared experiences. So organize shared experience with your team. Some of you might be groaning right now, but stay with me. You might be cheering later. And there's many ways you can achieve that in the workplace. Celebrations, you can organize shared learning experiences, you can have regular yoga classes, or you can have an afternoon-long retreat with mental and physical wellness group activities, or volunteer for a cause that the team feels passionate about, or something else. But it's important to ask your team what they want to do, what they want to learn about, what shared activities they want to participate and enjoy in, and involve them in the process of organizing these things, and that will increase the probability that they'll want to do them. And ask them, how often would you like to see these activities go on in the workplace? How much time per month should we spend on them? Involve them. And it doesn't have to be directly related to your industry either. Maybe you want to take a cooking class online together as a team. But I promise you, it will affect your work culture. So here's where we might see some cheers or some pushback, depending on who you are. So some guidelines to making these shared experiences happen. Respect the team's life outside of work hours, even if and when they don't. Super important. So when you're organizing these activities that fit your business or your work culture, if you're a leader in your workplace, and therefore your business, they need to happen during work hours. Budget time for that. And these aren't frivolous things. And this may be something our traditional brains may be screaming right now. What? Cooking class during the day? I don't think so. But I encourage you to fight through that resistance, and you will see that the benefits far outweigh the hour of work lost because the team took part in a fun activity together. And if you're not sure about doing something like that, try it like this. Try it once as an experiment and see what happens. I'd be curious to hear how your experiment goes. Let's normalize fun at work. This past weekend, I watched, they did a piece on 60 Minutes on Simone Biles. And she was talking about a training camp that she had gone to that was very disciplinarian style. And she said, when having conversations with the other gymnasts, that they, she's a fun person. I'm quoting her from the show. She says, we can laugh, we can enjoy gymnastics and be good at it. I think that was the misconception, that you couldn't be fun. You couldn't have a personality and be good. You could only be good at it, and that's it. But it's not either or. It's and. So these team activities shouldn't seem forced or uncomfortable for employees. So brainstorm with them for ideas, putting together activities that are inclusive and accessible for everyone. Ask the team for ideas and then give them choices to pick from. Because spoiler alert, forced fun is not fun. I'm sure we can all attest to that and all have stories about that. Because if the only fun thing that you're planning are after-hour happy hours, and whether that's a Zoom or in person, and you have people who are in recovery, let's say, or who don't drink, that's not fun for them. That's not inclusive. I'm not saying don't have them, but make sure you are doing a variety of things so that everyone can have the opportunity to be involved. Just ask your team. Fun is subjective. So fun. There's no one activity that everyone will think is fun, and what you think is fun may not translate as fun for others, and that's okay. Respect that. There's value in coming together, and there's value in doing things separately. Make space for it all. Some people are happy hour people, and some people just aren't, and that's okay. You don't need gimmicks to cultivate connection. And when I say gimmicks, I'm talking about ping pong tables, PJ Fridays, bean bags in the break room. If you're just doing that, that's the sprinkles on the poo if you don't have the other foundational stuff. So building a foundation, if you just do one thing, ask the team, what do you need from me today? And encourage the team to ask that of each other. Ask them what would make you feel more connected to the team. So important to involve them if you want to get buy-in for a lot of these activities and icebreakers and team building stuff, instead of just thrusting it upon the team. So in closing, trust, honesty, feedback, acknowledging our part as leaders in the business or the organization, our part in these things, whether that be in a leadership role at work or in other relationships in our lives, because a lot of these things I've talked about today can apply to any relationship that you have. But you can't fake it. There's no one size fits all. It's custom to you and the individuals on your team. So be an example, ask for help, and the number one tip is to make connecting a priority. Because remember, if we want change in the world and in our workplaces, we need to first change ourselves. That's where it all starts. Thank you so much to DreamBank for hosting this presentation today. I'd love to hear what things you take away from this and try in your workplaces, in your lives. Thank you for attending. Again, I do have a PDF that has the list of the How Are You alternatives and some of the activities, writing activities that we've done today and a few more. So I'll give that link to Andy, which he can share with you after. Please follow me on social media. I'm all over the place. Instagram's where I have the most fun. LinkedIn, I'm on there too. YouTube, 2 words, sock puppets. That's all I'm going to say about the YouTube channel. And thank you again for having me. I'm going to turn it back to you, Andy.
Thanks so much for that, Wendy. We do have a couple questions if you have a few moments.
Great, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So this one is from Cynthia. She's asking if you could just repeat the man's name regarding the gratitude quote.
Yes. His last name is Fair, and that's spelled F-E-H-R. His first name is Ryan, and he's a professor at the University of Washington in Seattle. He's on LinkedIn. So go look that up because that's a great study to check out.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Next question comes from Becky. Any suggestions for cultivating authentic gratitude?
Ooh, I think if we're talking about cultivating it with the team, again, I'm going to start it with yourself. So model it yourself. And again, that's where stuff like facilitating a gratitude circle in meetings. And if no one's speaking up first, then guess who goes first? You do. So just being authentic yourself it's kind of like a domino effect with other people. And it may not happen the first time, it may not happen the second time, but keep at it because it when you do it yourself and model it yourself, it's like infectious.
Wonderful. This one comes from Alberto. Chief Happiness Officer certification, question mark. Please tell us more.
I would love to tell you more. So Chief Happiness, and I don't know how much time we have, but so I came across this. There's an organization called the World Happiness Organization. They're based here in Florida, in Miami, and they have a World Happiness Summit that they put on every year in person. They didn't do it last year for obvious reasons, but somebody recommended this organization to me. You should go to the World Happiness Summit. And I, in going on their website, found this Chief Happiness Officer certification course. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll take this course, and it can be something I throw on my website and people will be like, hey, you're certified in something. But let me tell you, this course was no joke. It was an intense 3 days from 9 to 6, I think it was, of just mind-blowing research, examples of companies doing it. And it was 3 solid days. Like, I still have notes that I need to go through because that's how much information. On Monday, my brain was like, ah. So it was real. It was a real deal. Dr. Sandro Formica taught it. It was taught through the Florida International University based in Miami. So it's a great course if you are in human resources, if you are a leader in your organization. I highly recommend taking the Chief Happiness Officer certification. They're doing it, I believe, in person in Miami this year. So go check them out, World Happiness Organization.
Awesome. As of right now, this is the last question, so be sure to get any other questions in that you may have, folks. But from Carrie, how do you bring EQ, or I'm guessing she means, or they mean emotional intelligence, into the workplace?
I love that. So I did a live on emotional intelligence on my Instagram. So my first recommendation would be, if you're on Instagram, to go check that out. It's with Maureen Ake. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. We talked about emotional intelligence and how important that is in the workplace, and how you can train it. You can teach it. So she references some specific resources that you can go to, and you can actually take classes on emotional intelligence. But again, modeling it is also important. But go check out that Instagram live. It's from a few months ago with Maureen about emotional intelligence. And she cites some resources there that you can go to and take some training on it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Wendy. That looks like that concludes all of the questions that we have today. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you're curious about some of our upcoming offerings, go ahead and press that events tab on our Facebook page. That'll give you a good idea of what we have upcoming. Please reach out to Wendy with any additional questions or inquiries. Jesus, do you have your slide back up? Otherwise, I could certainly do that.
Yes.
Your happy workplace.
Oh, wait, am I sharing? See, here's where you're throwing me off. Here we go.
Oh, shoot.
Share screen. I'm doing it. I'm on it. I'm so on it.
I'll punch the email too. Well, there we go.
Do you see it?
Yep.
Okay. yourhappyworkplace.com. on that on Instagram, Wendy Conrad on LinkedIn, Wendy
Wonderful.
Conrad on YouTube.
Wonderful. Still getting lots of praise from the viewers who tuned in. We will go ahead and cap it there, though, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.